Global geopolitical and economic shifts are creating new challenges. So how is Japan using strategic investment to strengthen resilience at home and abroad? We talked to a panel of experts at the Euronews Hub at the World Economic Forum to find out, and here are some highlights of what we heard.
Mr. Yoshito, I would
Yes.
like to start with
Okay.
you, if that's okay. Can you begin by giving us some context about the state of the economy in Japan, please?
Let me talk about the economy by 3 points. One is about the stock markets first. Stock markets has risen to 54,000 Nikkei, and then which is twice in 3 years, double in 3 years, and triple in 5 years. Second is about unemployment and wages. Unemployment right now is about 2.6%, which is very low. And since the wage is up by 5%, so therefore you can tell. And Japan has been suffering for deflation for about 30 years. But now we have, finally, BOJ is raising interest rate. And right now, official rate is 0.75%. So we can tell that the economy is booming. Thirdly, let me talk about primary balance, income balance. We have more than $500 billion income balance in terms of dividends and also interest and capital gain coming per year, which is 130% of our current trade surplus. And that means like even though we lost a lot in terms of trade, we have the largest credit nation, and therefore we can tell that we are rich in terms of the economy.
Japan has identified 17 strategic fields to secure growth and economic security, as we heard. And it's a very volatile world. So at Davos, where competitiveness and resilience are top of mind, what makes Japan's approach distinct from other advanced economies who are pursuing industrial strategy?
Okay, and the approach of Japan is quite different from the US or China. In case of US or China, it's more about top-down approach and pinpoint and winners, and they subsidize them. In case of Japan, it's more about a bottom-up approach and more consensus and ecosystem approach. Let me explain about what it is. The approach is mostly like a consortium of leaders, and then let them share information, and let them divide the scope of work in terms of research. It's not just picking the winners. It's more about picking the industry that Japan should support, and at the same time trying to foster the industries. So it might take longer than other countries, but in the end, the ecosystem will be built, and therefore the stronger fundamental technology and those industries will be built.
Kumiko, what feels genuinely new about this strategy compared with Japan's past industrial policies?
It is so notable that Prime Minister Takaichi has positioned this economic security measures or strategic investment fields as growth opportunities. Growth investment is easy to understand. You can focus on your winning area and grow it more. But crisis management investment, according to her, is that Japan can be a leader in the leader position to countermeasure for the potential risks that not only Japan, but also the other countries globally would face. The economic security challenges, food security, energy security, and all these health and agriculture securities. So we wanted to tackle these challenges with our cutting-edge technologies, cooperation between public and private, so that Japan can be leading the initiative and show to the other countries how we can complement each other to respond to our vulnerability from the economic security point of view and make it as a growth engine.
I'm with the Klingendahl Institute in The Hague, and we focus on the geo-economic landscape. And I'm sorry to have to say here that the positive outlook for the Japanese economy that we heard it is even more impressive when you look at the outside world, where we see a revisionist China that has been coercing Japan and Europe, weaponizing trade and economics. We've seen a revisionist Russia as well, invading Ukraine and threatening NATO and its allies. And unfortunately, now also it seems that we are faced with a revisionist US administration that is pulling out of the multilateral system. Given all that, with the US leading both Japan and Europe basically into an era of globalization, we're now being led back from that era. And that is quite a challenge for both our regions.
What does that mean for our economic security and resilience?
I think both Japan and Europe are in the same pickle. And that pickle is that our economic interdependencies now have proven to be vulnerabilities. And I see basically three avenues out of there where both Japan and Europe are going to go on. The first is keep promoting and leading the free trade system through the WTO, but also by signing new trade agreements with like-minded partners. The second is we really have to consider more forcefully to also protect our domestic markets against economic coercion and also against the vulnerability against overcapacity in strategic industries. And then the third, and perhaps the most ambitious avenue, is seeking security through strategic investment.
Zsolt, how resilient is manufacturing in Japan and Europe in the wake of the recent global shocks that we've seen?
Donald Trump has imposed massive tariffs on all over the world, and the news is full of reporting that China recorded the highest export ever. But if you look at Japan and Europe, they are similar and they are doing very strong. I mean, we just looked at the latest November 25 data for Japan. And export as a share of GDP, again, we have a roughly monthly GDP approximation, was highest in November last year than compared to the previous year. If you look at Europe, you see the similar tendency. So exports to the United States declined, obviously, but overall exports is still doing very well.
From a research and analysis perspective, how is Japan's strategy fitting in with the US and China tensions that we're seeing?
I have to always talk about economic security viewpoint. It all comes down to the strategic autonomy and also strategic indispensability. When you think about Japan, actually Japan is really a resource-poor country. So for now, what we are trying to do in the current administration is we need to increase or enhance our strategic indispensability, which means Japanese products, Japanese technology, Japanese know-how is something that is needed for other countries, other territories, other companies, so that we are someone who is needed in the international scene, so that we can have this autonomy by balancing our risk between different territories or topics.
You mentioned technology there, Mr. Yoshito.
Okay.
You know, what is the state of tech startup now, especially in the VC environment?
When Prime Minister Abe came into power, he focused on entrepreneurship and more in technology and startups. So since 2013, venture capital raised amount has risen 10 times since 2013. It was right now roughly about 8.4 billion in 2013, and now before that it was only about 870. So it has risen by 10 times in 10 years. It's impressive. In 1999, when I raised capital, that time, it was right after Asian financial crisis. I was able to raise about 20 billion yen, but it was only 90% came from the outside of Japan. Only 10% came from Japan. It was difficult to convince financial institutions, pension funds to invest into venture capital. The last fund we raised is 4 times bigger than the fund in 1999. 90% of capital came from Japan, including government institutions like JIC and also GPIF. Growth is one of the top agenda of Takaichi administration. So you can tell that there are new things happening, and tech startups are coming up as well.
Zsolt, what EU policies do you think are in place that really foster innovation?
For example, if you look at Scandinavian countries, in particular Denmark and Sweden, they have highest private research and development spending. in global innovation scores, they rank very, very toply. They have a number of companies which were able to grow from being a small company to mid-size and reaching global scale. So something is known by these countries, and the secret is difficult to figure out, but certainly it's a kind of a combination of good domestic regulatory standards, including labor regulation, but also the European levels. For example, the European Research Council and Innovation Council, which largely follows a bottom-up approach, namely not top-down, setting centrally what are the future innovations and strategic places to go, but rather let entrepreneurs and innovators to come up with ideas, and having an independent assessment of them. I think that's the most successful way to foster innovation.
Kumiko, I'd like to expand a little bit on the risk elements that we've been hearing about. And from a geopolitical risk perspective, Japan's strategy seems deeply shaped by uncertainty, from supply chains to regional security. How are these risks influencing corporate and investor decision-making inside of Japan?
PwC Japan has been offering the service of geopolitics and economic security ever since 2016, when Brexit happened, and also the Trump administration 1.0 was there. But then the Russian invasion to Ukraine happened, and then that's really the wake-up call because U.S.-China trade war was impacting certain part of Japanese business, but not all of them. But when Ukraine happened, a lot of the Japanese CEOs realized if that happens, maybe something which is much closer to us could happen in some time. And what if? So that was the wake-up call for Japanese companies, and we started to have a lot of requests to work on a project about what's going to happen in the street. We try to talk to the companies. It's not about the crystal ball reading. It's about the scenario planning. You have to have different potential scenarios, and you have to make sure that you compare your strategy with the scenarios, potential scenarios, good and bad, and you have to make strategic decisions until which point you prepare to mitigate the risk, or until what kind of risks you can swallow still having the business going on.
I hope you've brought your crystal ball with you for our next question. Okay. 5 to 10 years from now, how should the world and also separately Japan be measuring their success?
Well, that's a tough question. Well, first of all, I think AI will come in, and that will determine about the competitiveness of the company and also country. If you talk about AI in Europe, they think about fear or uncertainty, and because they're afraid about losing jobs. The same in the US as well. But in Japan, it's different. Japan is I mentioned about unemployment rate. We have a labor shortage. Labor shortage means that we need to have more foreign people come in. At the same time, we have to utilize more female and also like elderly person as well. At the same time, we have to use AI as much as possible and robotics. And the approach of Japan in terms of AI and robotics are very different from the US or Europe, because we have been used to animation or manga. So the acceptance of society into AI are quite good. At the same time, Japanese companies are kind of securing jobs by, even though we adopt new technology, we retain the employees, we re-educate it so that kind of like job security is there.
I'm going to ask the other panelists if they can, in one sentence, answer what is the single most important factor that will determine whether Japan successfully moves from strategy to strength. So, Jan, we'll start with you on the end.
If I may comment it from a European angle, a success would be if the Japanese ecosystems manage to successfully co-invest with European industries in the challenges of tomorrow for resilience and technology development. Thank you.
I think the success would come if new innovators and new innovations will be able to bring and also challenge incumbents. In Japan, there are lots of big companies. They are doing well, but I think they also need some shake-up to be more productive, and young innovators can make that shift.
I would echo what the theme of this year's Davos, dialogue and spirit of dialogue and collaboration, because no one state can establish economic security standalone.
I think for the humanity of the world, we have to move forward for discussing about climate change and also about AI regulations.
We'll leave it here, but you can watch the full debate on Euronews.com. Thanks for watching.